So I'm required to warn you before you make any statement that you have the following constitutional right. You have the right to remain silent, not answer any questions. Do you understand that?
I do.
Okay. Any statement you make must be freely and voluntarily given. Do you understand that?
I do.
You have the right to the presence and representation of a lawyer of your choice before you make any statement and during any questioning. You understand that?
Sure. Yes.
If you cannot afford a lawyer, you're entitled to the presence and representation of a court-appointed lawyer before you make any statement and during any questioning. You understand that?
I do.
If at any time during the interview you do not wish to answer any questions, you're privileged to remain silent. Do you understand that?
Yes.
I can make no threats or promises to induce you to make any statement. This must be of your own free will. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
And any statement can be and will be held against you in the court of law. Do you understand that?
I understand.
Do you understand your rights?
I do.
Okay.
Good afternoon, and welcome to True Crime Mysteries. If you're new to the channel, hello and welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. In this video, we are discussing 3 more cold cases solved with DNA. But first, I want to take a second to remind you to click the like button and turn on notifications. This helps the channel out immensely. First, a huge thank you to our video sponsor, Being Verified, but more on that later. Let's get into it. Number 1. Sandra Better. On August 24, 1998, Sandra Better was working a closing shift alone in a Delray Beach, Florida consignment store. Only weeks away from retirement, the 68-year-old woman enjoyed her work at Luche's Consignment. The wife and mother of 3 grown daughters didn't need to work, but instead she loved being around people and preferred being at the store than being at home. The store was filled with vintage furniture, decor, collectibles, and it was located in a strip mall that was known for amazing thrift stores. Her husband, Zeke Better, recalled her love of the store and loved getting dolled up for work. The two had just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The couple had met in Brooklyn, New York in 1948 and had been happily married ever since. The two had plans to go back to New York to renew their vows, and the trip was to take place after her last shift at the store. On that August day, 2 teenagers had walked by the consignment store and noticed it was still open 30 minutes after it normally closed. They popped in to check to see if the store was still open, and to their shock, found Sandra, beaten and covered in blood, lying on the store's floor. 911 was called and EMTs determined that Sandra had died of her wounds. She had been stabbed several times and her throat had a large gash. There was a massive amount of blood all throughout the store. Sandra had several defensive injuries on her hands and arms, indicating she had fought her attacker hard. The cash register had been emptied, leading the police to believe that may have been the motive. However, the killer didn't take Sandra's Rolex watch or the large diamond engagement ring she wore. Police had a witness statement made by a customer who'd been in the store about half-hour before the teens had made the horrific discovery. She described being in the store with Sandra and a Caucasian man who was tall, skinny, and haggling the price of a couch with Sandra. Another witness said she briefly popped into the store right before closing time and saw a man at the cash register talking to the store clerk. The descriptions matched the other witness's account. She didn't stay in the store long, nor did she remember seeing anyone else in the store. Police set up a sketch and released it to the media. The best evidence found in the shop was that it appeared the killer had cut himself in the process of murdering Sandra. Although it was mostly Sandra's blood tracked throughout the store, there was another person's blood on the cash register, door, and a set of decorative balls near Sandra. There were also fingerprints which, along with the blood, were put in the national databases. There were no immediate hits, and without any further leads, the case went cold. Police had interviewed 37 suspects. One man who had gone to the hospital that day with a laceration on his hand, another who had been reported to police for abruptly leaving town and relocating to the Midwest, and a man who was far too interested in the investigation. None matched the killer's DNA or prints. Zeke Better, devastated by the loss of his wife, set up a scholarship fund for criminal justice students in his wife's name. He also spent every remaining year of his life volunteering for the Delray Beach Police Department until his death in 2015. In 2018, the Delray Beach Police Department got an unexpected call. After 20 years, they had received a fingerprint match on the Sandra Better murder case. The prints belonged to Todd Barquette, a 51-year-old man living in Brandon, Florida, who had applied for a job as a nursing assistant, which had required him to submit fingerprints for a criminal record check. Back in 1998, Barquette had been living in a mobile home near Lantana, 10 miles from Delray Beach. He also matched the suspect's description. He was 6'2" with light hair, and even 20 years later, he was still very slim. Barquette was never a suspect before his prints came up.
All right, so what would you like to know?
What this is pertaining to.
Okay, so
Never been in trouble for anything other than some speeding tickets and stuff.
speeding tickets? Okay. Just raise your right hand.
Sure.
Can you just state your name?
Todd Barquette. Todd
Okay.
Eric Barquette.
Okay, and your birthday?
January 8th, 1968.
Okay, and you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay. All right, so, like I said, we're from Delray.
Okay.
Have you ever been to Delray?
Yeah, my wife and I lived on the East Coast. I think we moved down there 95, 96, I think.
You moved on the East Coast? Where did you live?
East Coast, originally Lantana.
Okay.
Then we lived in, Lantana. We had an apartment in Boynton. We had a house in unincorporated Palm Beach, which could now be part of Lake Worth, I guess.
Okay.
And then Lake Worth also.
Okay, and when did you... Oh, is this the wife?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. When did you leave Palm Beach County?
When the first recession hit, that was 2007, I guess. Late 2006, early 2007. We moved to South Carolina for about 18 months.
Oh, okay. And then you moved here to
Then
Tampa?
came back down.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. And when you were in Palm Beach County, what did you do for work?
Worked for various mortgage companies. I started with a small mortgage banker in Boca. Phoenix Mortgage, I think, was my first job down there. But then I worked for Countrywide. I worked for Bank of America.
Okay.
A
And
lot
what did
of
your wife
different
do for
lenders.
work?
She was she started down there as a nurse recruiter,
Okay.
staffing recruiter.
Oh, she's a nurse here?
Yes,
Oh,
and
I
she's
see,
done
okay.
some CNA work, and then she was a per diem recruiter and staffer for cross-country staffing.
Okay, so various like nursing, medical.
Medical field, basically. of her
Okay.
life.
All right. So we're basically here because we're investigating a murder that happened a couple years ago.
Okay.
It was a number of years ago, and your name obviously came up, so that's why we're here. Have you ever been in Delray?
Yeah, a lot of times.
Okay. What was your purpose of going to Delray?
Normally we'd go downtown, usually like a Friday night or Saturday night, down to, what is it, Atlantic Boulevard, I think?
Yeah, East
Where all the
Atlantic,
stores
where all
are.
the
Yeah,
bars
all
and
the bars
restaurants are?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever gone to a consignment shop called Lachey's?
Possible. We used to do some stuff where we'd buy antiques or stuff, or just look around, shoot little stuff.
Okay. Any way that you would be in a South Federal Highway?
A lot, but not for any particular reason.
Okay.
Just because it was one of the main north-south roads.
Okay. Where did you usually go to consignment shops at?
Boca.
In Lantana, Boca?
Yeah.
Okay.
There were a couple nice ones down there.
Have you ever gone to any ones in Delray?
Not that I remember. I mean, if they were on Atlantic, maybe.
Okay.
But
Okay.
Do you remember anything that you picked up or dropped off at one of the shops?
no, I don't think we ever sold anything. It was usually just buying knickknacks.
Buying them?
Yeah.
Got anything still that you bought?
God,
No?
probably not. When we relocated from, we were living in Deerfield Beach when the financial crisis hit. We moved up to South Carolina and we sold a lot of stuff to facilitate the move because we just had no money. When we were in South Carolina, we bought a lot of stuff, then moved back down thinking we were going to downsize. We got rid of about a third of our stuff, also to help pay for the move. moving from a couple different spots in Tampa, kids are grown, so we've just downsized so often. I probably don't, other than photos, I don't think I have anything that's more than 7 or 8 years old.
Okay. How old are your kids?
30 and 28.
Oh, okay. All right, so mostly you were in Boca. If you had to do consignment, Boca, and if it was Delray, it was Atlantic Avenue. You never really went anywhere other than that. Okay. All right.
And it's possible we would have sold something. Honestly, I don't know. And my wife likes to buy. We buy a lot of vintage clothing. I guess you call it vintage, used clothing.
Just clothes, okay.
Because it saves money. But
Would she remember?
it's possible. I don't know.
Maybe I know she walked up here. Maybe we'll talk to her, see if she remembers.
I'll ask. I mean, that's 20 years ago. I don't know.
He had a minimal criminal history, mostly traffic citations. He had married and he'd been working in a retirement home for many years. When his picture was shown to one of the witnesses, she immediately picked him out of a group, identifying him as a man she saw in the store right before Sandra's murder. He was arrested in March 2018, and police were able to get a DNA sample and match it to the blood found on the cash register and the door. Police also noted a significant scar running from the right side of his mouth down under the right side of his chin. Barquette said he had been attacked by a dog, but police compared the scar to his driver's license, noting he had the scar after his 2002 license renewal photo. When the case went to trial, Barquette pleaded not guilty. His lawyers argued that he had gone to the store that day with a cut on his hand and touched a few of the items. He said no one was at the cash register and decided to steal the money on impulse. He denied ever murdering Sandra, but jurors didn't buy the story. After only a 90-minute deliberation, they came back with a guilty verdict. Todd Barquette was found guilty on August 23, 2019 for the murder of Sandra Better and sentenced to life in prison. Enough. You can use Being Verified to potentially see if they have a criminal history before you interact with that person. Being Verified can also be used in genealogy research, cutting research time by compiling public records in an easy-to-view way. Being Verified also has a notification system, so you can register a name you'd like to get notified on, and if anything comes up, you'll be notified. Let Being Verified take your research to the next level. If you'd like to try Being Verified, use my code TCM for 15% off at checkout. Click the link in my description box for more information. Thank you again to Being Verified for sponsoring this video. Number 2. Jane Morton Antonez and Patricia Dyer. On November 17, 1997, Jane Morton Antonez left her parents' home at 7:30 p.m. Recently divorced, the 30-year-old woman had moved back in with her parents in Atascadero, California, while she sorted out the next chapter of her life. That evening, she was supposed to go to her best friend's house, but never arrived. The following morning, Jane's family discovered that Jane was neither at home nor with her friend. After calling around and not locating her, her older brother offered to drive around and see if he could find her car. The car was parked on a side road off of Highway 101 and was only a mile from the house. As he got closer to the vehicle, he immediately knew something wasn't right, and he made the grisly discovery of his sister's lifeless body. Jane was in the back seat of the vehicle, her throat slit, and she'd been sexually assaulted. There was little evidence as to what had happened. Jane didn't pick up hitchhikers, and there weren't any obvious mechanical issues with the vehicle, no clues as to how someone had gotten to her. Her case quickly went cold, but it wasn't the only tragedy to hit Atascadero. 2 months following Jane's murder, Patricia Dyer, a 28-year-old woman, was found murdered in her home. She had been stabbed in the chest and had also been sexually assaulted. In both cases, the women had had their hands similarly tied behind their backs. As we know from the Golden State Killer attacks, knot tying can be very distinctive. Although close in age and having few mutual acquaintances, the women didn't know each other, nor did they have any overlapping interests. The night that Patricia was murdered, she had told a friend that afternoon that she had plans to go to the grocery store and needed to get some cleaning done. The same friend had popped over for a visit the following day and discovered Patricia's body. The investigation immediately connected the two women slain, but much like the first murder, there was little to go on. There were no signs of forced entry into Patricia's home, but police also acknowledged that Patricia kept a key under the doormat to her front door. Police had been very public with their opinion that they were looking for one perpetrator. They handed out hundreds of flyers with the cases on them, hopeful that someone remembered something of value to the case, but they also used the campaign to remind women to lock their cars, lock their homes, and to not let strangers into their homes or vehicles. By the fall of 1978, both cases were cold. None of the suspects panned out, and years later, one by one, they were cleared by DNA. In 2005, the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office reopened the case and uploaded samples of the DNA collected from the crime scenes to the national databases. There were no immediate hits, but the DNA would continually be sampled randomly in the automatic system. On June 21, 2017, the case was given new light when the sheriff's detective Clint Cole reopened the case again.
Well, I try not to get too hopeful. But when you know there's good evidence, like in this case, it's nice to know that. It's reassuring to know that there's a very strong chance that you're going to solve the case. When you have DNA evidence, it's really the golden ticket in most cases. What I do is I go through some of the reports that are online, looking for DNA evidence, fingerprint evidence. You don't want to just close it and think that you're on the right track. You want to know. You want to know that it's the person. And in this case, we do know that. And as a matter of fact, the first person that I called when I knew we had a confirmation on the hit was former Chief Deputy John Hasty, who was the sergeant in charge of these cases, and congratulated him because they solved the case as much as I did. I didn't do anything special. They're the ones that did by collecting the evidence.
His investigation led to opening up the search to include familial matches in the national databases, and after 40 years, they had a clear lead. The close familial match happened to be an incarcerated inmate, and it only took investigators a brief conversation to get a lead suspect. Arthur Rudy Martinez had lived in Atascadero in 1977 and had moved in the winter of 1978. He had been a suspect in the initial investigation, but there was no evidence to tie him to the crimes at the time. In 1977, Martinez had been on parole for attempted murder and rape charges. He had also been working as a welder in the area, but after the murder of Patricia Dyer, he relocated to Spokane, Washington. While in Washington, he committed multiple robberies and sexual assaults, and he was charged and sentenced to life in prison. In 1994, he escaped prison and lived in Fresno, California area for 20 years. In 2014, he turned himself into authorities because he had cancer and needed to receive medical treatments. His decision to turn himself in came too late, and 2 months after returning to prison, he died from cancer. Detectives were able to track down Martinez's girlfriend, and she had a box of his personal effects. The box contained his razor, and from that, investigators were able to pull enough DNA to test it against the semen DNA collected from 1977. The samples matched, officially linking Martinez to the assaults of Jane Morton Antonez and Patricia Dyer. Unfortunately, there will be no additional charges laid or a criminal trial. However, another cold case can be closed. Number 3. Carla Walker. February 16, 1974 in Fort Worth, Texas was a day full of excitement. That Saturday, Carla Walker spent the afternoon getting ready for a Valentine's Day dance at her high school. Carla was 17, a cheerleader, and a very popular Spitfire who had her whole life ahead of her. Carla was to attend the dance with her boyfriend, Rodney. He was a year older than her and a quarterback of the football team. Friends described the couple as the perfect high school sweethearts. Friends said that Carla's family adored Rodney. Though they were young, the couple had already started making plans for their future, and Carla's family already considered Rodney a part of their family, welcoming him with open arms. The dance was full of fun, full of laughter, and although the event was chaperoned, teens have a way of eluding authority. Rodney said that the couple partook in sipping from a flask and smoked a small amount of pot. Carla and Rodney left the dance a little early with a group of friends. The group went to a local eatery and grabbed some snacks and hung out for a bit. Carla and Rodney bid their friends goodnight and drove off. The teens didn't head straight home. Instead, the couple went to a popular hangout, the local bowling alley. They went in briefly to use the washrooms, then returned to the car. The parking lot was close to empty, and they had parked in an even more secluded area. They were sitting in the backseat of the car, chatting, laughing, and the two began kissing. Carla was leaned against the passenger door. They were absorbed in their activities and didn't notice a man approach the vehicle. The stranger opened the passenger door, and because Carla had been leaning her full body weight on the door, she quickly tumbled out of the car. Rodney had attempted to grab her when the man repeatedly started hitting Rodney in the head with something hard. The stranger put the object against his head, and only then did Rodney realize the item was a pistol. Rodney heard Carla say, "I'll go with you, just don't shoot him." Rodney heard the gun go off once, and he thought he'd been shot. The man then pointed the gun in his face and pulled the trigger a couple of times, but the gun made an empty click. The gun wasn't loaded. The assailant then hit Rodney again with the weapon, and this time Rodney was knocked unconscious. Rodney didn't see the man lead his girlfriend away. The last thing he remembered was Carla screaming, "Go get my dad." Rodney didn't know how much time had passed before he'd regained consciousness. He jumped back into the car and drove on autopilot to Carla's house. He tumbled through their front door covered in blood. Carla's father then drove to the bowling alley, which now was closed, and was joined by police. Police and volunteers undertook an extensive search. They searched by foot, by horseback, and by helicopter. Rodney's description of the man was clean-cut, Caucasian, slender. He had short, wavy hair, a thick Texas drawl, average height, and was wearing a shiny green sleeveless vest and a white cowboy hat. At the abduction site, police found a magazine for a .22 caliber Ruger pistol. While Rodney was the initial suspect, police didn't have much to go on. After 3 days of searching, police discovered Carla's body. She was partially clad in a ditch near Lake Benbrook. Police determined there had been evidence to suggest Carla had been held captive, tortured, sexually assaulted, and injected with morphine. The autopsy estimated her time of death of Monday, meaning she had been held captive for roughly 24 to 36 hours. Her cause of death was strangulation. Police received 200 tips from the public, and several suspects were investigated. One such man was a previously convicted car thief who lived less than a mile from the bowling alley. Glenn Samuel McCurley was a truck driver who was off work the night of the abduction and had no alibi because his wife was away that weekend. He was initially picked up because he had recently purchased new bullets for his .22 caliber Ruger pistol, a gun that had matched the magazine that was found at the abduction site. He had said his gun had been stolen while he had been fishing. The date he gave for the theft of the weapon was around the same time as Carla's abduction, and he told police he hadn't reported it stolen because he had a criminal record. He was eventually released because there was no evidence to directly link him to the crime, and police focused on other suspects. Over the years, several people came forward attaching themselves to the case. However, all were able to be eliminated. Police did have key evidence, but needed to wait until technology could catch up. DNA was found on Carla's clothing and preserved. In the 1990s, the DNA was input into the national databases, but nothing came up. In April 2019, police received a letter from a person claiming to be the man who had abducted and murdered Carla. Police put that letter out on social media and asked for the man to come forward. In September 2019, police joined forces with Ortham Incorporated, a private lab in Texas. Ortham was able to pull a full genetic profile of the suspect. Using familial genealogy, the lab was able to reverse engineer a family tree. They were able to narrow it down to 3 brothers, all with the last name McCurley. Cold case investigators recognized the last name as it matched one of the initial suspects. In July of 2019, police collected a sample of McCurley's DNA from discarded trash. Following a positive match, they were able to obtain an arrest warrant. After his arrest, he submitted 2 additional DNA samples, which both tested positive. This solidified investigators' belief they had found the right man. 46 years after Carla's murder, her killer would face a grand jury. Now 77, Glenn Samuel McCurley faces a capital murder charge and is being held on a $100,000 bond. After the arrest, Carla's family said it brought them relief to have answers and justice for Carla, finally. Hopefully, it also brought a relief to Rodney, now in his 60s, who has lived his entire adult lifehood under a cloud of suspicion. Although he was never a named suspect, there was always a cloud of doubt in the court of public opinion that followed him. At this time, there are no further court dates. McCurley has not obtained legal counsel, though there will likely be updated court dates in the new year. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Through the coming months and years, I believe we will begin to see a massive influx of cold cases being solved by DNA. It seems that every few weeks new stories come up and old cold cases can finally be solved. Sometimes we get the justice we desperately want to see, other times we just get a resolution. Thank you so much for tuning in and hanging out until the end. As always, please give this video a thumbs up if you like the content and subscribe for more if you haven't already. If you've done all that and you want to support me and the channel, I have linked a couple of donation options in my description box. Also a reminder that there is a merch. Please check it out. Thank you all so much for your support. I appreciate it greatly. Bye.